introduce our speaker for the Fireside chat. Richard, welcome. I just wanted to just quickly say, Richard is part of Ameritas, which is a mutual life insurance organization, and he's been in the IT industry over 30 years in the defense, manufacturing, and consulting and software industries. He started with Ameritas back in 2010 as a VP of IT, and he was elected Senior Vice President and CIO of Ameritas in 2013. And so any of you who've been in the business long enough know that that makes Richard unusual to be tenured in a position that long. Given the turnover for most organizations, we don't see that often. And to me, one of the most interesting things about Richard is that he was both introduced into the CIO Hall of Fame this year, and that also he is a member of the Society of American Magicians. And I know in my 40 years of working with CIOs, a lot of them gripe about that their companies expect them to do magic all the time, with technology. Richard actually was a professional magician. I think it's the first time I've met a CIO who is one. So with that, warm welcome, Richard. Thank you very much for joining us today for this fireside chat to talk about, how these organizations can grow. And maybe we could just start off, if you could just give a little introduction about Ameritas and maybe what a mutual life insurance industry company is like. You have to come off mute. We can't hear you yet.
Mute. I thought I clicked that button. Thanks. Good evening, everybody. I think it's evening, right? On that side of the world. So Ameritas is, we would call ourselves a diversified financial services company. We actually do what's considered life and annuity, disability income. We're also the 5th largest provider of dental insurance in the US. Ameritas is predominantly a US focused company. And then very, very, very small, what we would call retirement plans business. If you're familiar with the US market, 401k, 403bs, kind of that defined contribution mechanism that allows people to save for retirement. So we have those 3 kind of predominant business lines, but I would say 45 is our dental business and our life and annuities business. And we're a mutual company, and by that, one of the things I like to say is, as a mutual company, we only have 2 mouths to feed. So a stock company has 3 mouths to feed. It has to feed the stockholders, it has to feed the customers, and it has to take care of the company. We only have 2 mouths to feed. We have to take care of the company so that it's around to fulfill the promises we made, and we have to take care of the policyholder. So we like that proposition. And Ameritas, we kind of brand ourselves around this idea of fulfilling life. And we've been working really hard to figure out, what does it mean to have a fulfilling life, right? I could take that all the way to just life insurance and say that means you have the right type of risk. Bad things happen and you live, bad things happen and you die. But to have a fulfilled life, it's potentially to retire well. It's potentially to make sure both the risk is covered as well as the accumulation is covered. So, and what else does that mean to you? Does that mean you're active in your community? Does that mean you, is it just financial well-being? Where does social well-being kick in? Where does personal where does those things play? And we want to make sure that we're understanding that. And we're honed a little bit more around that altruistic aspect, and then trying to figure out what do we provide in there, right? As anything, we're not gonna become a company that's not in the kind of risk business, right? Risk solution business. We're gonna stay in our space and our niche and try to connect in a way that makes sense across that kind of, I'll call it, well-being spectrum, so that our customers, we hopefully can connect them to the aspects of a fulfilled life. So a little bit about Ameritas. I think we're trying to figure out what our unique niche is, right? And I think that's an important piece, right? Everyone's got to figure out, why would you buy from us as opposed to the other, 1,800 life insurance companies that are in the US, right? That's That's always an interesting debate to have, right? How do you create the differentiation that you're looking for? Just a little bit about Ameritas. I probably should have just did the little whatever. We've got our little snippet, here's what Ameritas is, but I'll do a little more relaxed version of that.
Yeah, that's great context, Richard. Thank you for that. So given that, and given all the participants who are listening in, have a keen interest in understanding how to grow their services business, including in the United States, what would you say in general? Could you just talk a little bit about what are you, as an example of a customer, what are you looking for in a provider? When you contract for either IT or business services, what you look for, and I don't know if you have any examples of good or bad attributes that you see in the vendors that you've worked with.
Yeah, and I want to tie back. I was glad I actually was on and watching some of your previous topic. I'll tie back to that a little bit. So, for Ameritas, we're actually, as a lot of firms are, everybody's got whatever version of digital transformation is their version, and I think you always got to be careful to not create some blanket version of that. As I talk to people, digital means something different to different people. So we have our version of what I would say that transformation, and that transformation is a combination of digitally enabling our business, shifting to a way more customer focused and centric model, becoming an insight-driven firm. How do we, I like to say, how do we move from report-centric to analytic-centric to insight-centric? So you think about that's 3 very big journeys across 3 very big kind of dimensions of our business. And one of your slides, you talked about how sponsorship is changing, and what I would caution is, as CIOs, we've been working to get the sponsorship shifted, because in all honesty, the sponsorship should move towards where the benefit is being obtained, right? I think way too many CIOs were trying to own those things instead of help the firm put those things in the right place. However, with that said, just because sponsorship is moved doesn't mean we're not involved, we're not actively part of the delivery, we're not an integral part of the system, right? In this day and age, there is, I think the lines between business and tech are blurring so much that you can no longer sit and say, well, you tech people go over and do that, and you business people go over and do that. You literally have to work together. So when we start to look for service providers, Ameritas, we're looking to lean out. So we've got this transformation. So we're in a stage where we're really going to bubble up. We're going to try to go get a lot more done in a defined period of time. So we're going to push the needle, we're going to increase the investment, and we're going to go drive more work. So we're looking for, firms and providers that can come in and help us get those things done, right? And it depends on what we need, right? We're going to work them on those initiatives. We're going to try to build the things that we need to go do. We're going to try to drive the higher levels of automation. We're going to try to drive more straight through processing. We're going to try to become a more effective and efficient organization on the inside. We're going to try to go create higher levels of self-service, better customer engagement. I'll put those in the stakeholder, we call them stakeholder interactions. So we're trying to stop using the word digital everywhere, because that just creates a discussion of what does that mean. But in the end, it's an online interaction. It's our websites, our portals, our mobile apps, and what do we want that world to look like, and how do we want to take care of our customers and our producers and our partners, and the ecosystem of players that come together to deliver our products and services into the market. So we're looking for partners that can come in and help us accomplish those initiatives. And as you pointed out, get those outcomes done, right? Yes, do I need people who can fill roles? Absolutely. So I would say, 1, firms that can come in and help me accomplish an objective or an outcome. Firms, one of the things we've been looking at in terms of service providers is how do we de-risk our talent challenge, right? So to me, that's another important part of the equation for us. Talent is hard to get. Talent is a challenge. We're always fighting for talent. Every time I'm in a meeting, somebody's saying, I can't get the talent I need to get this stuff done. We see the partners as an opportunity a lot of these partners have, you got great recruiting engines, have the ability to grab talent early, develop them, train them, bring them up to speed. To me, there's an opportunity for me to stop worrying about that as much, and then source that from places who are focused on it and are doing it. So I see that as a major value proposition in a lot of the firms, right? And as we've looked to lean out, that is one of the things that we're looking at. So I'd say those are probably some of the two things. But again,
Okay.
it's back to what are we trying to accomplish on any of these projects? And it's different. And my coaching would always be, don't come sell me what you want to do. Come talk to me about what I'm trying to do and help me do it, right? Because I know you and I talked about this, I think, in another forum. I get 350 emails a day from somebody trying to tell me they want a 15-minute meeting, or they want to talk to me, or they want to, and that's not the number of phone calls I get making the same request. If you'll just tell me what you're doing, then I'll solve all your problems. And, if I just take out my calculator and I add up 15 minutes times 350 calls times whatever, guess what? I'm not doing my job, because all I'm doing is spending my time on the phone talking to people who are calling me. So I don't know if I have a great answer to that, but my answer would be, you've got to find a way to come learn me enough, to come invest in me enough. And trust me, the data's out there. I mean, as you pointed out, I was in those industries for a while. You probably got to burn a little bit more in the sales cycle to go learn who that customer is, target them, and walk in the door and start talking about what I'm doing, and I'll listen a whole lot faster, right? Because if you're just bringing me a sales pitch, as much as I hate to say it, you sound like there's 2,000 of you, right? There really is. And I think if I have any advice for the India-based firms, it's your competition's not just the other India-based firms, right? It's Brazil, it's Mexico, it's Russia, it's Ireland, and there's US firms cropping up that are doing the, what I would call local shore model, right? Go up in North Dakota and Louisiana. They're finding these low-cost areas, and they're building little pockets that emulate kind of the offshore model and saying, here, but I'm here and I'm local. So you got to recognize that that competitive landscape everywhere it is, because that's who's coming at us, right?
Makes sense. I think that's excellent advice, Richard. One of the things that I talked about in my presentation was around this idea of creativity and innovation in your products and services. What role, or how much do you rely on service providers to help you drive that kind of innovation and creativity?
Yeah, I think, and it's interesting. It's kind of, I guess the short answer is probably not as much as they think. There are so many places today where we're, first off, I always tell people, recognize that I buy IDC, I have a Forrester membership, I'm connected to Deloitte University, I get McKinsey reports. The research level that I have access to now, and the information about what new innovations are and what they are, is pretty extensive, right? So one more voice telling me, here's this cool thing you should look at, is probably, just more noise, right? So I think where we really want to rely is, hey, you're trying to do this, and here's a really neat thing that we think can move that forward. So I think firms that are in more of, I'd say, the delivery mode with us, it's more take it down to the level of let's go pilot that, and let's go do a POC on it. Let's go do that. Because that's where, no offense, the research firms and the McKinseys can't help me, right? They can show me all the ideas. The idea generation is massive, huge, and coming from a million fronts. The how do we go put something that makes sense and gets a little more tangible so that I can put an investment behind it, but also recognize that I can't burn a lot of money, and I'm a medium-sized firm, so I don't have the checkbook to go play in a lot of places. So I have to say, look, my 5 cents that I spend on that, I got to make sure I'm spending my 5 cents on something that's going to yield. So I have to very quickly reject things that aren't going to yield a good result and get behind things that are. So the degree that a firm could get in and help me get a little closer to that would be great, right? That to me is where the value really comes in on that innovation, right? It's not about bringing me the ideas and the thought leadership. I'm getting that. I'm getting inundated with that. It's about how do you walk in and say, again, this is the hard part I know for the firms, because if you're not already doing business with us, how do you bring those value propositions forward? But that's where you got to play, as much as I hate to say it. And so, you know, if you talk to your salespeople and they're frustrated about not being able to get through to us, that's why, because it just feels like noise out there, and it's not helping us do something. And we're so focused on having to get something done. The other thing I would say too, just to throw in, is don't go around us, right? I mean, back to this IT and business, we're working hand in hand. So when someone tries to sell around us, you know, yeah, you can go show a business person a shiny object, but 2 steps later, he's calling us on the phone. And now, you know, we're starting off irritated, which is like, why did you go over and get this guy excited about this thing that none of us have the time and the money to go, you know, to go invest in. But if you were working with us, we would have probably been able to help you guys. Now, I'm not trying to say all things got to lead through the CIO either, but you got to find the point at which you're balancing between those two. Because if you just kind of go rogue, and I know that, you know, a lot of industries are like ours, that's probably the other one in that side, right? How do you go deliver that? But I'd say innovation has to be on that practical level, is where we get the most value out of it, not on the thought leadership side.
That's helpful, Richard. I hope folks are listening in terms of when they're trying to craft their value propositions and pitches to you know, to companies in the U.S. and elsewhere, because I think that's great advice. You know, I'd also be interested to know, you know, I talked a little bit about ESG and sustainability. You know, clearly those are hot topics right now. You know, being in financial services, I think it's a little different than if you were making cement, you know, something where there's, you know, kind of a heavy carbon footprint element. But from an ESG perspective, are you looking for any third-party help? You know, what is it Ameritas might need from third-party providers in this kind of new context of looking at ESG standards?
Yeah, I right now, right, and everybody's kind of moving into this in a slightly different way. I think what I see most financial services firms, I mean, we're obviously trying to look at our ESG score and how do we think it plays out, and but for us, it's probably going to be more about, you know, it'll creep into our procurement processes. We'll buy from firms that have a better score than firms that don't, right? More so about us having this massive ESG program. I think as you said, the S part of that is probably where our focus is, the social part of it. We feel like we have a little bit of an altruistic business mission, so making sure we can hone in on that a little bit more feels right, and hopefully that makes us a firm people want to do business with. The environmental side, I think, back to your point, you know, we're trying to be more effective and efficient, drive things to be a little more, you know, online, digital enabled. That should bring our footprint down. You know, I think it's probably a minor focus for us. I don't want to say we don't care, we do, but, you know, I'm not in manufacturing. I don't have a plant. I don't have a big carbon footprint. I'm not an airline that's trying to figure out how do I, you know, reduce all those emissions. So for us, it's probably going to be more around firms that can say, hey, we're focused on it, and we're doing things about it. You know, it'll be more about us doing business with firms so that we can say, you know, the way we care about it is to do business from firms that are scoring better in that area. It'll be a criteria. It won't be the criteria. It'll be a criteria.
Yep, that makes sense. So one more question for me before I sort of open it up to the audience to see if we've got any questions typed into to you, Richard. This is really kind of just a last call. We've covered a lot of different topics in terms of how organizations, you know, that are service suppliers can improve their attractiveness to customers in the U.S. Anything else that you think that you know I haven't asked you about or that we haven't talked about yet that that you might say is really important advice that you'd give any of these prospective suppliers?
Yeah, and I think, it's I think there's two things, right? I would say I'm going to offer advice in two categories. One, if you're trying to get into firms, and two, if you're already in the firm, because I think the need is different, right? One, if you're trying to get into us, I think I gave you a lot of insight into some of the challenges I just see on the selling side, right? My other advice there is don't assess me to death, right? Got to find a way to get in and start helping me practically, tactically, and then learn as you go, or try to figure out how to learn me. So that's one. When you're in with me, here's a challenge I would love to give to all the firms to try to go figure out. When we're doing change type work, right? It's hard for the inside firms always go back to what we know, right? I mean, we've seen this. I mean, how many project studies have you said? I implemented a new piece of technology and I had it do exactly the same thing that it did before. I've been pushing on my partners to say, you've got to help me change, right? And you can't help me change by getting down at the team level and just doing whatever the heck that team says, right? So that kind of change management, change leadership, and that is an uncomfortable place, I know, for consulting and service providers to be, right? It is uncomfortable because at the end of the day, you want to measure yourself on how happy I am. What I want to tell you is happy at this level is not happy at this level, right? And the degree that you can help us as leaders change where we want to get to in the future, which means you're going to have to get down there at those lower levels and push us on the inside to go someplace that our teams don't want to go. We know they don't want to go. We're trying to push them there too. But if the partner comes in and the partner becomes part of the problem, then I've got the change event again is just hard for me. And we believe the outside firms have a great proposition to come in and help us with that. And I know that's hard work. You got to figure out how do you balance that satisfaction at the varying levels, and how do you know when you've crossed the line? And there's a lot in there, but that would be my last advice on if there's one thing that I see just fails too many times is that I ask for it, but the partner in biases back towards we're down at the team making them happy, and and that kind of help with the change. It just falls back on us, right? Which maybe that's where it belongs. Maybe that's where the firms would say, hey, that's you guys' thing. You got to focus on it. But we're always asking for help on that. And it seems like that's a really hard place. So that would be kind of one of my my last pieces there. The other thing is, I throw one more in. You had a really good slide where you were kind of showing. The other piece is recognize that a lot of us firms, we're not 100% custom developed shops. I think 90% of the discussions I'm having, someone's talking to me about agile, DevOps, customization. Those are all techniques to get me somewhere. At the end of the day, I'm a combination of building, buying, sourcing, it's all about how I integrate that together to deliver that outcome. And I think a lot of firms have got to stop biasing towards this pure custom development world and go understand that I've got packages that run my core, not Salesforce and my financial system. That's common everywhere. I mean, I buy packages that do my core business processing, claims, policy processing. I don't build that stuff. I buy that stuff. So recognize that I have to live in this world of I build where I need to build, I buy where I can buy, and then I got to make them work together in the right way. That would just be advice that as I talk to people, it always starts with it feels like an over bias towards everything's custom development, everything's about agile and DevOps. And it's like, that's great for the stuff that I got to build, but that doesn't work for packages.
That's excellent advice, Richard. I think it's good at sort of balancing the themes of, we talk about business and technical and custom and package, all of those things I think are very true. And your point about change is well taken. I know as a consultant, that used to always be kind of like an afterthought. It's like, yeah, if you want change, we can add that to the project. Just like if you want training, we can add that too.
Right.
I'm seeing more and more firms actually who are successful at leading with the change components. Again, it's hard, it's uncomfortable, but it's what ends up getting those results. I know we're sort of winding down here, and I just wanted to thank you again, Richard, for your time and sharing your insights and wisdom with participants. I just was wondering, Sharath, anything from your end, questions you wanted to just touch with Richard before we close it out?
Yes, thanks, Gard and Richard, for this wonderful discussion. There are a couple of questions. I think the first one is about reverse shoring or reverse offshoring, and in fact, Richard spoke about it a little bit. Maybe Richard, do you see this trend of reverse shoring where service providers are planning to move work back from India to an onshore location, or do you see India to be the preferred location for outsourcing or offshoring? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. First off, I think our perspective now, if you look at it, we're looking at how do I source talent and how do I get work done at this balance of price and quality, right? It's really not about where anymore. It's about, price, quality, and am I sourcing from a place that's helping me get that done? So I do see some and you're always going to find some firms that are like, I'm going to go back to native and, I need to, US. I think we're more about what's that right balance and how do we go think about it that way? And then how do we decide where is a firm that can do that? So we see a lot of the firms that are saying, well, I have India, I have Ireland, I have these places and I can source multiple. I like that proposition because that says you guys are going to go figure out how best to deliver the work and where from. I'm going to focus on the quality and the process and the value and the value for that, right? Price, quality, and delivery. But I think you got to recognize that we are trying to find this balance of where you go get it, right? Where you go get it and how you look at it. I would just come back and say, recognize that is real competition, right? That is, and they've got a value prop. They're going to sell their value proposition, right? And right now their value proposition, I've seen some very interesting ones. There's, like I said, there's one we're a little firm up in North Dakota. We're tied to a university. We're making sure we got a talent pool. We got a great cost of living. We built the center. It's basically your onshore, offshore capability, right? Buy from us. I've seen some that are say, we're now veteran, it's all veterans, right? So they're finding ways to create niches, and kind of value propositions that are different. So I think, as much as I hate to say it, I would say, what you got to do is come back and say, it's not about being an Indian firm. It's about being a firm that can deliver the following things, right? Where you are just happens to be where you are, right? If I gave you any advice, it would be kind of get out of the where you're from side and just get into the, hey, here's who we are and here's what we do and we're good at it. There's a lot of things I love about, India was the first one in that kind of technology outsourcing space. You guys get to claim the ground of, we've been here the longest, we've matured at the most, so those kinds of value propositions resonate, right? And they are true, right? They're not just sales pitches, they're true. We've been honing it longer, we've been maturing it longer, we've been working at it more, we've been trying to figure out this balance with you longer, we've been trying to figure out the quality side and the talent de-risking side, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, but I think you got to make sure you understand. And then, again, now you're getting the other countries jumping into the game saying, hey, us too, right? But we don't see the maturity there yet, right? And I think it's how do you stay ahead of that curve, right? How do you kind of keep your leadership position, so to speak, without right? But recognize those are real competitive, threats. If I were sitting in your shoes, I would see that as a competitive threat. And we as buyers, we need to do our due diligence. We need to look and say, well, there are options now, and we need to look at our options. So how do you put that value proposition together that says, why buy us, right? Because the slide that says, I got 42 of these and 6 of these and I'm this big, everybody has that slide. The slide that says, I do business with these companies, the logo slide, everybody has that slide, right? The slide that says we're relationship based, everybody has that slide, right? I think that's why I keep coaching. I would go in and say, here's the 250 things I've done to solve business challenges for my partners. That's a slide I don't see that often, right?
Right. No, very well articulated. I come from an IT services background in my previous job, so I completely relate to what you're saying. So basically, the India story is intact and it has matured, but there is competition from other locations. It's all about what value you deliver, irrespective of where you're located. At the end of the day, it boils down to that, right? Yeah. Gard, we have the second question for you. Please let us know the demographics of the survey respondents, especially in terms of the split between small and medium businesses and enterprises for some of the data you presented.
Yeah, I tried to answer that offline, but we can get to Shivani to sort of get out to those who are interested in the actual details. But the quick answer is most of the respondents are from sort of mid-size or larger companies. So U.S. revenues of 500 million or above. It's a worldwide audience of participants, but medium to large companies.
And we have one last question. How do you see the organization structure changes while moving to cloud native operating mode? How are they planning to consolidate? How are you planning to consolidate your service providers, Richard, in this particular context?
Right, I'm gonna try to. That's a lot to unpack because
Yeah.
I'm thinking one is it my org that's changing. So if I talk about my org, I do. All right, I'll try to answer what I think it was, and whoever it is, if I missed it, come after it. So one, I've built my org to be what I would call capability based, not based on whether I'm cloud or not cloud, right? So I've got what I call my business systems teams. I've got what I call integrated operations, which we call ecosystem management now because we have to manage everything everywhere. So my org at large does it. The way we do things at different points in the equation, right? So my internal cloud in my data center, because I'm 99.9% virtualized in my data center from an infrastructure, I look like the other guys from an IaaS perspective. However, from a development environment, all of that, I don't, right? So I lean out for the development environment, I lean out for data. I don't know if I'm going to to me, the number of vendors I have is always based upon how do I want to get leverage, because I want to lean into one and try to get as much from one to get some type of volume and leverage. And again, make that partnership work better because you're doing more with what I would call source de-risking on making sure I have alternatives. So you don't want too many, but you don't want too few. So you're always working on those. And I'm not sure if we're really talking about kind of the cloud providers. I'm not sure I'm going to get to live in a world where I can pick one, right? I mean, if I buy this software solution and it runs in Azure, I'm in Azure by virtue of doing that. If I'm running that one that's in Amazon, I'm doing that one. And I'm hoping that the cloud native stuff kind of gets to the point where the mobile phone world got, right? When we were first developing mobile apps, we were very native to the mobile app. And now we have platforms that allow us to develop and deploy to multiple mobile apps. I'm hoping at some point that we can see a little bit of that. But I think it'll take a while, right? Because Azure doesn't want you to go be able to move from them to Amazon, and Amazon doesn't want you to move to them, and IBM doesn't want you to move to them, and Salesforce wants to keep you on Salesforce till you're dead. So, I don't know if that answers the question, but I would say as a CIO, right, it's about making sure I don't have too many that I can't manage effectively, too few creates a risk in the other direction. So I'm always trying to find that balance. When I first start, I tend to lean into one so I can learn, because I can't learn on, it's kind of like the art of war. I can't fight a war on multiple fronts. I lean into one in order to learn, but end up expanding into the other to create the de-risk, right? So we leaned very heavily into Amazon to begin with. We're now kind of de-risking towards Azure, right? And we've kind of chosen two there. We're not moving into the thirds and the fourths unless it's a package buy, right? Like we do have Salesforce. But I mean, that's a SaaS solution that Salesforce takes care of, right? Hopefully that answers the question. There was a lot to unpack in that one, and I wasn't sure where they were going.
Yeah,
My org, the vendor org, or the Amazons and the Azures.
It was a pretty loaded question, and thanks for answering that, Richard. In fact, we come to we have exceeded our time, but I would like to thank you, Richard, for joining us early in the morning there for this particular webinar. Very, very insightful discussion. Gard, thank you so much for your insights as well. How to grow 3x in the next 5 years. I'm sure the audience would have a lot of takeaways from this discussion.
Glad I could help, right? Thanks for letting me come talk to you guys. I appreciate it. Have a great evening, all of you.